Welcome back to the Single Malt Review, where we're bringing you independent and individual views on fine spirits from around Scotland and around the world. And I don't get much more independent and individual than what we have for you today.
Yes, indeed. I thought it was probably high time we did this one because, in fact, if you're familiar with our channel, you've been looking at this one as I have editing videos every single time. It's a bit of a fast that we've never gotten to it. It's the Caperdonich bottle, which graces our episode screen. You might remember it. And I saw it in the cabinet there, sat and alone, and realised we've never actually visited this one. So it's just about high time that we did. So, let's have a wee look. Obviously, it from Duncan Taylor's Rarest of the Rare, be that as it may. In fact, you know what, Caperdonich still fairly available, but it is a closed distillery. Closed since 2002, so that gives you an idea of just about the age of any Caperdonich you're likely to find. This one, however, is slightly older than that. This one was distilled in 1992. It is a 20-year-old malt. And it's not a bad one by any means. Caperdonich, originally built as the rather uninspired name of Glen Grant No. 2 Distillery. Someone clearly thought a great deal about Glen Grant, I should say, and maybe not a great deal about the individuality of this distillery, subsequently called Caperdonich as it was brought forward into the 20th century and underwent a few closures after that until finally being mothballed and decommissioned for one last time in 2002.
Eventually even demolished.
Sadly never to return. So this one is dead and gone, as they say. So
you never even visit the site now, so this is going to be a real time capsule. A certain hint of melancholy there too, knowing this place is literally gone for good.
But the whiskey remains. Never has it been truer that we're dealing with liquid history as the microphone attempts to fall over. Here we are. Hope that wasn't too loud on the stream, I'm sure it wasn't. So, Caperdonich, it's a Speyside, and it wasn't called Glen Grant No. 2 for nothing.
Is it entirely Speyside? There seem to be differing opinions on the matter.
Well, I think it's Speyside. Like many closed distilleries, there isn't a great deal of information about it, but no, I think it's Speyside. It's in Rothes, so that more or less plants it there. And as I say, it wasn't called Glen Grant No. 2 for no reason at all. It was very much built to emulate the very popular, very saleable Glen Grant style, which it more or less does, with a few differences. Now, this is cask strength. It's not particularly strong.
It's a single cask.
It is 54.7%, which is, it's held well for 20 years, but it's not blow your head off 63% or anything like that. So,
relatively pale colour, harkening back to what you have surmised as a bourbon maturation.
I would put a fairly moderate amount of money on saying this was a second fill bourbon cask.
It's much more brown.
Maybe a first fill bourbon, depending on how active a cask it was, but not a third, and certainly not a sherry. So, one or the other. Bourbon, one way or the other. It has a very, very Speyside nose, and actually, it has a very, very Glen Grant nose. It's quite clean.
I'm getting boatloads of fresh fruit, particularly bananas and feijoas. The thing is, I don't much like bananas or feijoas, but I can appreciate the smell, certainly.
Feijoas, I can get. Bananas I can't quite grasp. It's fruit, and it's that Speyside tinned fruit, which you get in Old Speyside, which I'm particularly picking up here.
Yeah, Speyside does tend to get a little musty and a little drier sometimes.
I think this, as it was built to do, follows Glen Grant, which is it's fruity, but it's also very, very malty, very creamy. It follows it to a certain extent, but this has gone in its own direction, and the direction it has gone in is a very fresh and fruity one. There's tinned pear, apple, almost all the way into pineapple spectrum of vibrant, acidic fruits. It's very, very lively for a 20-year-old whiskey.
Yeah, a lot of fresh fruit, and just a hint of a fresh hay bale. You may not have ever had the occasion to smell that, but freshly baled bunch of hay on a hot summer's day.
It's a
little bit of that.
Very classically
Underneath all that
Speyside, yeah.
It's a little bit musty, a little bit dry.
So let's investigate the
also
palate
very grassy.
at full
Yes.
strength. There's no prickle on the nose, but we're still dealing with a pretty strong percentage here, so we'll just have to see how we go.
That's
That's not bad.
there is a flavour in there I can't quite identify. My mind is saying it tastes green, but what is that?
There is a leafy, herbaceous quality to it, which is slightly deviating from Speyside.
But there's also some more fresh fruit. I'm getting mangoes and melons.
It's just a hair strong for me, so I'm going to add a bit of water,
We'll
bring
need
it
water.
down to about 45, 46.
There's a waxy feel, almost like beeswax or lip balm or something, which is doing interesting things to my palate and the inside of my mouth.
There is a waxy oiliness. It's quite a good, strong body. And you know what? Though it is different, this is quite facsimilar to a good old Glen Grant. They definitely named this Glen Grant No. 2 for a reason.
The addition of some water has brought out some more bourbon-y characters. I'm getting hints of vanilla and oak on the nose.
Certainly that's brought a bit more vanilla in. It's still... The tinned fruits are still very, very dominant, and...
Tinned fruit salad is now coming through on the palate.
This is anyone that knows old-fashioned Speyside, this is really what it is. And this is by no means old enough to be really called old-fashioned Speyside, but I think it's certainly made in that style. When you get really, really, truly old Speysides, if you're lucky enough to end up with a 30-year-old or even a 40-year-old Speyside whiskey, this tinned fruit flavour really comes through. And though this isn't remotely as old as those bottles, this is merely 20 years old, which is perfectly old as far as whiskey goes. It's not quite historic in that same capacity, but in terms of its flavour profile, with these distinctly and uniquely tinned versions of these fruits, not fresh but tinned, that with heavy syrup added, as it says on the tin, these sweetened versions of these otherwise fresh fruits. It's very, very old-fashioned Speyside whiskey, and I think it's really pretty good.
You mentioned pineapple earlier, and I'm finally beginning to get that. With the addition of water and some exposure to air, it's finally that sharp, but also tinned pineapple flavour. Aroma, even.
It's really pretty interesting stuff. And it's something, as I say, is harder and harder to get these days. I'm not sure why it's fell out of fashion, because I think it's quite glorious, really, to taste. Possibly it's a bit too lifted to fit into blends, and that's why it fell out of favour. Their blenders were looking for something just slightly more banal, to put it uncharitably.
It's strongly sweet, but perhaps lacking in weight. It doesn't have the heft and darkness you might expect from whiskey at this age. So that could be what was holding back from inclusion in blends, or just from engaging with public preferences and tastes of the time.
I really don't know. But this one, scores-wise, it's a fairly complex one, which always makes scores difficult for me, but it's easily an 80, and I think it's an 81 for me. It's a very, very good whiskey, and it makes me quite sad that we won't be seeing too much more of it. But I suppose that's just how things go in the world of whiskey.
I would go higher, up to an 87. It has a fruity complexity I would not normally expect from an entirely bourbon matured whiskey. especially when it comes across as being so pale, almost to the point of being anemic when you look at it. So it's 20 years old. It should, my mind says it should be darker, but no, it is strong, it's sharp, it's sweet. It's all in a very clearly focused image of those peculiarly fruity and fruit salad characters.
Yes, indeed. It's pretty remarkably good stuff. And unlike some closed distilleries, it's still more or less available. And because it's not, say, a St. Magdalene or something along those lines, it's no Rosebank, it's no ultra sought after closed distillery. It's merely a closed distillery. You can still find this on the shelf, as I did a couple of years ago. So if you are interested, and I think you should be just a little bit interested, especially if you're a fan of Speyside whiskies, because this represents something that you just don't see, or rather you see less and less in Speyside distillates these days. This really, really strong tinned fruit salad thing. Whiskies are going cleaner, they're going fresher, but they're losing some of this really, really sweet tinned character that they used to have. And for what reason that is, I really don't know, but I think it'll be a bit of a shame once it's gone. And it will be gone soon, because even though distilleries are opening almost every year, it would seem, we were doing a new distillery just a few reviews ago with our Wolfburn, which you can, if you check back through the archives, you'll find that, and that was a tremendous whiskey as it was, but it will be many, many years before it has the opportunity to produce something of this complexity. And so when you lose a distillery that's got so much history and so much character behind it, it's always a bit sad. But as I say, this is still available, so you can still get in on the tail end of Caperdonich's life and see what it once was, and whether you're doing it to mourn a fading style of Speyside whiskey, or whether you're simply celebrating what it once was. I think it's worthwhile doing it, and it's these releases by Duncan Taylor which allows us to experience that which is otherwise gone. So I would applaud them. Of course, Duncan Taylor not the only bottlers to release otherwise closed distilleries. There's a few floating around, but Duncan Taylor's Rarest of the Rare, even if they're not all that rare, is a good one to go for, and they're quite well priced as well. So I would that'd be a good place to start if you were looking at some of these things. But anyway, this has been a long overdue single malt review of our packaging bottle. Keep safe in the meantime. We will have something very interesting for you coming up right around the bend. In the meantime, Sludger.